Masculinity isn't rigid. Hello? Welcome back to my 90 days of lessons from me to you. And today's lesson is going to be a little bit more geared towards the guys of today. It'll be a more male focused video. And that it's that masculinity isn't rigid. And what do I mean by this? I feel like oftentimes growing up, especially as men of color, masculinity looks a certain type of way for us, right? You got to be the strong, commanding man with a presence, right? And that is a masculinity. Like, that's a part of masculinity. That's the basic definition of masculinity. I mean, it goes further beyond, just men of color, like all men. Masculinity is a universal thing for all men, but I'm going to speak from my own experience of what masculinity has meant to me and what my journey through life, how that has shaped my masculinity and my viewpoint and perception of masculinity, right? So, like I said, masculinity is usually seen as this one rigid thing where you always have to be strong. You always have to be like the man of the moment. Like you take charge, there's no crying, you're providing, you're making sure that everything is going great. Even when you're not doing great. And that's the problem with that rigid view of masculinity. It's so old, right? Looking back, there's so many times where I feel like people always make the joke with their parents, especially with their dads and their grandfathers. It's like, oh, like, yeah, your dad didn't hug you when you were younger, and it's like, my dad didn't hug me when I was younger and I turned out fine. It's like, sure, you're here, but there's so many things that you haven't addressed. There's so many things that with you that you're uncomfortable with, that you don't feel comfortable talking about, right? There's so many things that happen to you. Like, to some extent, there's a universal male experience that we don't really talk about. And a lot of men usually end up being depressed about it because they're like, oh, a man has to be strong. A man has to be, this, a man has to be that. But it's like, sure, there is a universal experience, but there's also nuances there, right? A man can be soft. A man doesn't have to be strong all the time. A man can be caring. A man can show emotion. It's okay to cry, guys. It's okay to cry as a man. Like, for me, one of the most relieving things, I go to the gym a lot, and I would say I don't suffer from anger issues, but there's there's pent up like emotions inside me. And I go to the gym, I let those out, and I'm moving weights and stuff like that. I'm getting on the treadmill and I'm just going. But it's like, at the same time, crying doesn't negate your manliness, right? It's okay to cry as a man, because crying, your body literally needs to cry. It lets out these chemicals in your brain that soothe those thoughts of depression or anxiety and things of that nature. And crying really does help that. I don't know if you've ever cried or you've seen a girl cry, where they cry and then they're all right, they bounce back and they're ready to go, right? I feel like we always say that men aren't more emotional than women, but I think it's actually quite the opposite. I believe women are better at regulating their emotions than men, which is why women may seem more emotional, but no, it's just because they're expressing their emotions. We as men, we keep our emotions like pent up and stuck within us, and whenever we do lash out, it's big. Sure, a woman may lash out more than a man does, but like it's in small bursts, unless she's been holding it up for a long time. But the thing is, whenever men do lash out, it's seen as this violent event, right? Like, it's seen as, oh, I'm fearful of the fact that this man is lashing out at me currently. And I understand that, men are big, typically bigger than women. Men are bigger than children. Men are stronger than women and children. So it is seen as this type of like violent event. But at the same time, speaking from my own experiences, the way that I regulate my emotions, whenever I was in a relationship with the person I was with, sure, there'd be times where, she was, a little bit scared, but it's not the fact that she was scared of me. It was just the conditioning, right, of how a man is whenever they lash out. Now, keep in mind, I never put my hands on this woman, and I never dare to put my hands on a woman. I will never, try to harm a woman in any way, emotionally, physically, or mentally, with my own anger, right? I always try my best not to do that. Physically, if you hit a woman physically as a man, you're a bitch. If you express your anger by taking it out, not even just women, on other people, on people that are weaker than you, you're a bitch. That is that. There's no further discussion of that. You're a bitch. and you deserve whatever the fuck is coming towards you, right? So yeah, I feel like, we as men, we need to look at masculinity as this thing where it's like, it's okay to cry. It's okay to express our emotions. It's okay to express love. It's okay to tell each other that we love each other as guys. I'm lucky enough to where my father doesn't have, my father's still like almost 50. So he does have some, rigid view of masculinity. But at the same time, I grew up with a father who tells me that he loves me. I grew up with a father who hugs me. I grew up with a father who, wants to talk to me and calls me every single day. And we have a good connection. I'd say I have a better connection with my father than I do with my mother. And, it's unfortunate that a lot of men don't really have that, right? And I feel like if a lot of fathers or a lot of men, go to therapy or try to seek some way to express themselves, whether it's physically, emotionally, artistically, just find different ways to get out your emotions and acknowledge your emotions. That's one of the most important things that we need to do as men, is acknowledge and express our emotions. It's one thing to know the emotion and then push it down. It doesn't help, because it'll come back and hit you randomly at fucking 3 a.m. one time. And you're out here running like, oh my God, what the fuck am I doing? I'm such a bitch for crying, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, you're not. No, you're not. It takes a lot of strength to cry. I know it's weird and sounds weird because we look at crying as this feminine thing or this childish thing, but it's like masculinity. To truly live in your masculinity and be a man, you need to acknowledge all the different varying emotions of it, right? Femininity is looked at this as this dainty thing where women can pretty much, express themselves in any way that they want. Okay, cool. Masculinity is looked at this thing where a man has to, pull himself up and make himself strong. And it's not like, yeah, that's okay. That's cool. I agree with that. A man does need to be a strong man, but a man also needs to acknowledge that strength looks different. I know that one day, whenever my dog or my dad or my mom passes away, I'm going to be distraught. That doesn't make me any less of a man. Crying doesn't make you any less of a man. Crying does not make you any less of a man. You are allowed to cry as a man. You are allowed to speak about your emotions as a man. And I feel like once we, kind of acknowledge that as men, we live such a better life. We live such a better life. Masculinity is looked at as this tool to try to maybe get women, when it's not. Masculinity should be for yourself. You should live comfortably in your own masculinity. Your masculinity shouldn't be defined by what a woman expects. Granted, there are things in there that, if you want a certain type of woman, then yeah. But your masculinity shouldn't be defined by the women at large in the larger, greater world. You're not going to be for everybody. So fuck them. There's nothing wrong with the fact that you're not going to be for everybody. You just aren't. Everyone's made differently for other people. Our own experiences shape us differently. So if a woman is going to look at you and say you're a bitch for crying, that's just not the woman for you, bro. That's just not the woman for you. The last girl that I was with, I've cried in front of her before. I've called her and told her that I've cried before, and she didn't look at me as any less of a man. Like, she didn't look at me as any less of a man. She didn't disrespect me. She didn't call me my name. She didn't call me a crybaby. She didn't do anything like that. And I truly hope that each man finds a woman like that. Granted, we aren't together anymore and whatever it is, but I do know that going forward in my life, I will find another woman like that. I will, because I won't settle for a woman who has this one rigid view of how masculinity is supposed to look. That's just it's not what I want for my life. I'm not going to want a woman who's going to tell my son that when he's crying, he's a bitch. I'm not going to want a woman who's telling my son that whenever he's expressing himself, it's like, tough it out and be a man. No. He's a child. Let him express himself. And one of the reasons why I even brought up the whole race thing for men of color, and I'm going to speak specifically to black men, is because in the black community, I see this, maybe it's like a quiet section that just has a lot of clout on the internet, but I see this idea of little black boys being seen as grown men, right? And I mean, that does also translate to the court system, because there's been so many times where little black boys are treated like fully grown men in a court setting. However the hell they ended up there, where I know that if it was like, a little white boy there, they would have babied him, because we see how they treat white men in the media versus black men, right? But I mean, just people in general, to be honest with you. But the thing is, masculinity is not this rigid one catch-all thing that it has to be like this, it has to be like that. That's not how masculinity works, man. Masculinity is, like all things in life, a spectrum. Your masculinity can look different. It's just what your masculinity is to you. And to also be masculine, bro, you got to be in touch with your feminine self, right? Like, there's nothing wrong. You're not gay. You're not looked down upon. And if anybody's looking down upon you for being okay with your sexuality, fuck them. Fuck them. You don't need them in your life. So, yeah. That's today's lesson. This was a more of a serious topic. My mind's kind of over the place because of some new information that I got today. But I really hope you guys are getting value out of these videos. And, you know, as always, everything that you do in life, put God first. Love yourself more than you love anybody else. And if there's nobody out there that loves you, I love you. But there is somebody out there that loves you. I love you. I will see you tomorrow.